Welcome to this explainer. If you've ever wondered why some startups absolutely explode into billion-dollar unicorns while others barely make it out of the garage, you are definitely in the right place. Today, we're taking over 40 global research papers and distilling them down to map out the exact data-backed blueprint of how entrepreneurial ecosystems actually drive the world economy.
Okay, so let's kick things off by busting a massive myth that pop culture just loves to feed us. I'm talking about the myth of the lone genius entrepreneur. For decades, we've bought into this romantic idea of a solitary visionary building a massive empire totally alone in a basement. But the data tells a completely different story. The truth? A startup is really only as strong as its environment. It literally takes a village, or in this case, a highly complex ecosystem, to raise a unicorn. So, here is our roadmap for today's explainer. First, we'll look at the anatomy of an ecosystem, then culture and context. After that, support networks. Fourth, digital accelerants, and we'll wrap up with the macroeconomic impact. Let's get into it. Section 1, Anatomy of an Ecosystem, moving beyond the lone genius.
Think about famous hubs like Silicon Valley or Tel Aviv. They brilliantly prove that a startup is not an isolated island. It's actually part of this highly interactive feedback loop. Every single player involved, from the researchers at the local university all the way to the government tax office, acts as a vital node in this giant, interconnected web. These ecosystems are the real engines of disruptive innovation because they aren't just random collections of isolated businesses. They collaboratively cultivate and scale new ventures. Moving right along to Section 2, Culture and Context. Think of this as the ecosystem's soil.
Context is absolutely crucial here. Just to put this into perspective, 85%. That is the staggering failure rate for small businesses in Zimbabwe within just their first 3 years. Now, why is that number so incredibly high? Well, researchers attribute a lot of these failures to founders trying to forcefully copy and paste mismatched Western business frameworks into a local environment where they just didn't fit. Simply put, when the seed rejects the soil, it's not going to take root.
This contrast perfectly illustrates why indigenous models are so vital. Western frameworks often push aggressive individualism and competitive advantage, right? But many specific African contexts actually thrive on the Afrocentric Ubuntu leadership model. This is a philosophy deeply rooted in group solidarity, strong social relations, consensus, and compromise. And guess what? When Zimbabwean businesses align with these local cultural values instead of fighting them, their survival and growth rates shoot up dramatically. And listen, this isn't just an African phenomenon either. Across high-income OECD countries, broad social norms directly dictate macroeconomic success. Over in Nigeria, we see a specific blend of religious beliefs and a really strong work ethic, significantly boosting SME performance. In Vietnam, it's organizational culture that drives early-stage innovation. So the bottom line? You absolutely cannot build a thriving business if you ignore the cultural soil it's planted in. Section 3, Support Networks. This is where we start watering the seeds. To really understand support networks, we have to look at something called the triple helix model. After massive comparative studies tracking hundreds of founders across Indonesia, Malaysia, and Singapore, the data is just crystal clear. True innovation requires a perfectly balanced, interactive relationship between three specific things: government policies, university support, and industry involvement. If even one of those is missing, the whole ecosystem takes a serious hit. Now, while that triple helix concept is universal, how it's actually executed varies wildly across the globe. Take India, for example, where the flow of venture capital is heavily moderated by deeply ingrained local tribal and caste institutions. Then contrast that with Porto Alegre in Brazil, where university innovation hubs are the primary engines connecting academic research straight to regional economic strategies. Or look at the UK, where these highly orchestrated networks of science parks and academic spin-offs are driving regional growth. The specific mechanisms change, but the need for that core structural support, that stays constant. So the main takeaway you should definitely remember here is that sustainable innovation is never a simple copy-paste job. You cannot just pick up the Silicon Valley playbook, drop it into an emerging market, and expect a unicorn to sprout without local adaptation. It requires bespoke engineering that actually respects local institutions, constraints, and cultural frameworks. All right, Section 4, Digital Accelerants. This is tech acting as the ecosystem's fertilizer. Let's break down how technology actually integrates into these environments. Let's use an Indian vegetable supply chain startup as an example. Adopting tech isn't just about buying some new software license and calling it a day. It is a deliberate, step-by-step journey. First, you tap into open data ecosystems to really understand the market. Then, you pivot your entire business model based on those insights. And finally, you leverage digital platforms to scale up massively.
And these digital tools allow developing ecosystems to literally leapfrog traditional, slow-moving barriers. The examples are just incredible. Across Africa, brilliant platform-based agricultural social enterprises like Hello Tractor in Nigeria, Lursha in Ethiopia, and Firmerline in Ghana, they are revolutionizing farming by turning a standard smartphone into a direct bridge between smallholder farmers and heavy equipment. Over in Vietnam, high-tech founders are using AI, open innovation to totally bypass traditional R&D limitations. And in Saudi Arabia, advanced fintech analytics are driving incredibly rapid digital transformation in their emerging economy. A massive global review brings us to this mind-blowing conclusion. Integrating modern Industry 4.0 tech, stuff like automation, smart networks, and AI, it is not just a shiny trend. When you inject that tech into a healthy ecosystem, it can swing a nation's macroeconomic dynamics by up to 40%. I mean, that is a massive amount of fertilizer for widespread regional development. Which brings us to Section 5, Macroeconomic Impact. It's time to harvest that economic development. To really grasp the sheer scale of this impact, just look at the number 3. By leveraging its uniquely diverse networks, venture capital, and digital platforms, India has become the third largest startup ecosystem on planet Earth, trailing only the US and China. And hey, this isn't just about corporate bragging rights. This level of ecosystem maturity creates vast new career opportunities, elevates the overall standard of living, and adds tremendous, tangible value to the entire country's economy. But who exactly is driving all this incredible value? Well, global studies from places as diverse as South Africa and France reveal it boils down to 3 core founder traits: innovativeness, proactiveness, and risk-taking. But here's a really surprising twist in the data. While innovativeness usually gets all the spotlight, it's actually proactiveness, acting on an opportunity before it's even fully realized, that serves as the absolute strongest direct link to long-term success. Ultimately, though, beyond the billions of dollars and those flashy big tech unicorns, the real harvest here is the vital human impact. Research highlights how household-based enterprises are profoundly empowering rural women entrepreneurs in places like Oman and Katsina State, Nigeria, directly lifting their families' incomes. We're seeing social enterprise managers, who are so often driven by deeply personal, transformative experiences, crossing borders to solve critical community issues. And perhaps most importantly of all, in emerging economies, this type of entrepreneurship is widely recognized as the primary panacea to the massive, massive challenge of youth unemployment. Because at the end of the day, success is deeply contextual. So as we wrap up this explainer, I want to leave you with a thought to chew on. Take a look around your own city or your own industry and ask yourself, what unique local ingredients, cultural strengths, or untapped networks are just waiting to be watered? Thanks so much for exploring the data with me today.